Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast presented by BioSteel. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. Tonight, we have a very special guest. He's joining us for his very first time. You can find him on TSN 1260, and you can find him on TSN through some NHL games. Also, he's also done 2 CFL games this year. We like to welcome Tom Gazzola to the 2 Months Podcast. Tom, how's it going?
Good. Hey, thanks for mentioning the CFL on TSN games. I brag about those to
Yeah.
everybody because it was fun. It was like finally
Yes.
I get to be Rashog. I was strutting the sidelines
Yeah.
with like the strut. I'm like, you got the mic in your hand, and I'm like, now I know why he has that strut. So thanks for mentioning it, Josh. I
Oh,
appreciate it very much.
no, it's awesome. It must feel good because how many times have you been sitting in those stands watching those games? Now you're able to kind of jump over that barricade and be able to kind of call that on the side. How special was it to get those 2 games in this year and hopefully get more down the road?
Yeah, hopefully more. I really enjoyed it. It was different. Like that was the best part of it because I'm, 14, 15 years of hockey in the Oilers, which is great. I
Yeah.
mean, I it's like pasta. I could have pasta every day. Give me hockey every day. I love it. But you're like out of your element. I love the CFL. I love the NFL. I love football, but because I never grew up with it outside of watching it, I want to make sure that I do it justice. And so it was cool because you're right. Usually I'm on the sidelines in my seats with a
Yes.
couple of beers in my hands and with some friends and enjoying the game. But it was cool, like the speed and the pace and how quickly it went by. It gives you another appreciation for it. And I know there's not a lot of there's some people that don't want to give the CFL its due and they
Yeah.
like to rip on it and stuff, but it is impressive. Those guys are like right there with NFL players. I mean, there's only so many guys that make it to the NFL.
Yeah.
I love it. So I hope I'm back on those sidelines patrolling. Maybe I'll dial down the Shogger strut, but
Yeah.
I truly, it was just different. And you want to do a good job. It's a national audience. There's big viewership on those, and I enjoyed it. So here's hoping.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, do you know how that's going to look next year? Is it kind of? I know that's still a ways away, but you are seem like to be picking up a little bit more things with the network, and we've had a lot of TSN people personalities on our end here, but how excited are you to maybe see if that can turn 2 games into maybe four
Yeah,
or
that
six? Because like
four,
obviously,
eight.
yeah,
Give me all 21 weeks. I don't care. Bring it on. Like I'll do it all. The
yeah,
summertime is quiet. I mean, with
yeah,
hockey, we still talk hockey, but I haven't heard anything. I'll pester the right people and say,
yeah,
hey, I really like that. You want me to do it? I'll do it again. No
yeah.
problem. It's just reminding them that you're kicking around, especially when you're kind of one of the newer guys in the fold, kind of so to speak. So I'll send out the emails, I'll send out the phone calls, and put up my hand. Hey, I'm around, and hopefully it leads to more. But
Yeah.
I didn't hear anybody say it was really bad what I did, so that's usually a decent indicator that we're on the right path.
Yeah, exactly. So for the listeners that don't know, obviously you're very local and you're very, very well known, but we do got some people from the other markets that don't listen, maybe that don't listen too much to TSN 1260. But where was your path? How did you get into the industry? We've very got a very successful NAPE program here in Edmonton, so I'm assuming
Yep.
maybe you probably went there. But how did it start for you? Was there a passion journey to get to where you got to today?
Yeah, it was a Nate grad right here, 2008. I think the spring of '08 was my class. And Edmonton kid, just
Yeah.
same thing as most guys. I just played hockey growing up. I went to Lloydminster to try out for the Blazers at the time. Did well, and I got a call to come back because half the team I think got into a bar brawl like a week after I got cut, and they're like, "Yeah, you could come back and play." And I was like, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to play junior B." So I spent 4 great years of Jungle B with a bunch of guys that kind of did the same thing with the Edmonton Red Wings, and we
Yeah.
had a good team. I worked at Costco in the tire shop, and so I partied a lot and
Yeah.
and all that good stuff. Like I lived the life, and then my parents were like, "All right, you're done hockey. You need to grow up here," and they're like, "You need to go to school, otherwise we're going to charge you rent or you have to move out." And I was like, "Ah." I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a teacher and then a secretary when she moved to Canada.
Yeah.
So I went into psychology to do to see if I could be like a social worker like my dad. And I lasted like a month. I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
So I was twiddling my thumbs. I'm like, well, what do I like to do? I like going to sporting events. I like I like hockey, I like football, I like anything. Like I like going to sports. How do I get paid to do that? And I was like, well, I was watching, I think it was like CFRN back in the day, and I'm like, maybe I could do that. And I was not somebody who would talk or be like one of those like people that would
Yeah.
be the life of the party or anything like that. I was just quiet and kept
Did
it
your
to
thing. Yeah.
myself. Yeah, and then I went to Nate and I was like, boy, I better figure this out or I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely you kind of work at it, and I ended up as Gene Principe's studio assistant for a full season
Okay.
in
Perfect. Yeah.
07, 08.
Yeah.
And I got him coffee. I got him his game notes. I found out if there were interviews of interesting people. Like David Foster was in town one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know who that is. And I had to meet him and ask him if he could uh, do an interview with Sportsnet and Gene, and he did it. It was great. One night, Mike Babcock was in town with the Red Wings, and I guess Morley and Rod wanted him on the Ched broadcast. And Gene's like, well, I've got my studio runner. He can set it up for you. And I was like, oh my God. So Gene sent me up to the old catwalk at the Coliseum. And I go up to Mike Babcock. He's there with the Red Wings brass, and they're watching the Oilers game because it's the night before they play them.
Yeah.
I go, excuse me, Mr. Babcock. I'm Tom. I'm with Sportsnet. Gene or 630 Ched, our friends at 630 Ched want to know if you'd be willing to do an interview with them. And he's like, yeah, sure, right now. And I was like, yeah. And nobody told me when it was supposed to be. That was the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So I take Mike Babcock to Rod and Morley's booth. I don't know Rod and Morley. I've
Yeah.
never talked to them in my life at that point. I knock on the window. It's during the play. Morley looks at me and Rod looks at me, and I'm like, Babcock's here. Babcock's here. And they're like, what is this? And then Babcock's like, you're not ready? I'm out of here. And he stormed away. And I was like,
Oh
oh.
no.
So I had to like learn some harsh lessons and
Yeah.
I ended up, and the funny part about Lloyd is I ended up working in Lloyd anchoring news
Yeah.
a year later. And then I went to CTV. Then I did Oilers TV for 8 years. And then after that ended, wound up with TSN, first filling in for Rashog a little bit. And then now they gave me the Oilers pre and post game show on 1260 and some other stuff here and there. And that's where we're at now. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it is for sure. We were kind of just talking about the Oilers TV here, kind of just before we jumped through the recording. But if you can, or talk about your experience, but also some of the mentors that you've had along the way that helped you, be the professional that you are today in the industry and doing such a great job at it too.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I mean it, man, because you grind, man. Like that's what I like, is you grind. And I was at just a morning skate with our junior hockey team here, our minor hockey team, sorry, during the Battle of Alberta here in Edmonton.
Nice.
And Luch and Toffoli came up and kind of met our team before the game, or before that night. And I just kind of saw, it's just kind of interesting because doing this podcast, you kind of see the grind of what you guys do, and getting the news out to the fans and the lineup and all that stuff. And seeing you grind. And there's one day I saw you're walking from your apartment probably to the rink too. So I was,
yeah,
it was pretty cold. So I was going to say, Tommy, jump in, I'll give you a lift. But I was going the opposite way. But anyways, talk about some of the mentors and obviously your experience with Oilers TV.
Yeah, mentors. This one I always stand by. Like Gene, you might not like the puns, you might not like the shtick, and
yeah,
this guy's been doing it for so long that he knows that broadcast inside and out. So it's almost like it entertains some people, and for him, it keeps it spicy and interesting. And like, what can I come up with in this show? And so it's kind of that element. And the guy dials it in. Like when he needs to be on a national broadcast, he's excellent. There's two guys that they used at the Vancouver Olympics for men's hockey, and it happened to be Gene Principe and Ryan Rashog. And those are the two guys I honestly looked up to the most, even before I got into the industry. And being able to work with Gene as his studio assistant was surreal at first, and then becoming really good friends with him. And now, like today, he called me, Josh. Like he phoned me from San Jose just to talk, and we're catching up on things. Hey, did you hear this? Oh, what about this? Like, to even like take a step back and be like, you and Gene are friends,
yes,
colleagues, peers. Like, it's mind blowing. Like 20-year-old Tom would be like, shut up, that would never happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rashog is the same way. Like Ryan he's more of the straight laced, Dial it in. I'm going to tell you what's going on. You might not like it. And there's a certain tact to that as well. So I would just say, well, you can't be Gene, you can't be Ryan, but you could take elements from those two. You can watch others as well, like around the National Hockey League and other sports, and try to implement that into your own style. And I feel like I've done that, but those two guys, people around here have seen them for years and years and years. Some might be tired of them, some
Yeah.
might be tired of me. It's part of the business, but those are the guys that I always look to. And when I was with Oilers TV, I'd always lean on those two for perspective, how to improve, what am I doing good, what am I doing bad. I would get air checks from those guys. I'd go to Gene on like the more Oilers centric stuff,
Yeah.
to kind of keep, like, because I wouldn't want to. And I was saying to you before we hopped on, Josh, it's like when I was on Oilers TV, when the team sucked, I knew they sucked. Like, and you're not going to BS Oiler fans. They know. Like, you've got the crazies in every fan base. You've got your quiet people, but then most people and the vast majority of Oiler fans, they know. So you can't feed them BS.
No, you can't. Yeah.
So I would always try to toe that line, but I would have to go to Gene and be like, okay, Paisan, like, I know this is going on. I have to control, like, say it a certain way. How do I do it with integrity? And he'd always have recommendations and suggestions, and I would implement those. And then I would go to Ryan. I'd be like, "Hey, can you watch this?" And I'm trying to get this, across in my story without having Kevin Lowe and Steve Tambellini come down from the office and yell at me for 20 minutes. And Ryan would kind of give me the other perspective. So I would get the best of both worlds, and I would just try to amalgamate them. And then at the same time, provide the story of the day to the fan base and use words. The team sucked, Josh. The team would suck.
It was
like
bad.
I was front row seat to one of the crappiest eras in hockey and Oilers history, obviously. But the way you choose your words and how you structure those stories, and the message, you still get it out there that, hey, this team's garbage, but you do it in a way where it's like, you don't just smack them in the face with it.
No.
You kind of like, hey, look, it didn't go so well. Here's why. Boom, boom, boom. And then people, when they're watching, they're like, yeah, that was terrible. That was junk. That was junk. I'm glad he brought that up. So
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the way I went about handling those situations for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a tough one to navigate when you're in a market that's very well educated for the most part. And you, like you say, you cannot BS these fans here. Like they know, and they'll call you out on it too. They'll either call you out on social media, or if they see you in person, they'll call you out on it too. So, yeah, so no, that's amazing. And we just had Gene on, and he came and dropped the puck at our Winter Classic, and it was pretty sweet.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's a beauty, and we've had Rashog on a couple of years ago, and he's amazing person, and always good to kind of just bounce advice off these guys and see how they succeed in the world that we love so much. And talk about before we move on to some NHL stuff, but can you talk about like your relationship with Bob Stauffer, Jack Michaels, and how close that was during your Oilers tenure with Oilers TV?
Yeah, they're still my boys.
Yeah.
I guess, for a lack of a better term. I'm still tight with them. Like, Jack, very much so, because Jack and I were hired the same week.
Yeah.
Obviously his role much more prominent, and then it's only gotten much more prominent since. But yeah, Jack and I have just we bonded right away, just because we were brought on at the same time and we were new to the organization, and we just hit it off. So they're my boys. Like, I talk to them every day when I'm at the rink. It's still the same types of conversations. The only thing is we can't really share information the same way we used to. And even though I'll try to pry every now and then, especially with Jack, with like line combinations or little things here and there. Bob and I have a good rapport. So it's like, hey, it's kind of, you just look at each other and we just kind of nod our heads and we know. But those guys are pros, man, and they're characters. There's a reason why they are where they are, and the team and organization hangs on to them. They know their stuff, and they hustle. That's the other thing too. You talk about hustling. Like, these guys have been doing their jobs for a long time, and they still grind it out day in, day out. So those two, we would have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I do miss being on the road with them because there's a lot of tomfoolery that happens on the road that involve the three of us and some others. And
Yeah.
fortunately, they're still good friends, and it honestly feels like nothing's changed, and really it hasn't, outside the fact that I don't work for the same company as them.
Yeah, I think if anything, the road pops and the road beers and the road wings aren't the
Yeah,
same as they were before. So
yeah.
missing a key part to that for sure. So move over to the Oilers and current news. Kind of what's your thoughts of the team so far? I know we've been, you know, on your radio hits and on the pregame and postgame show, you've dissected it pretty big, but are you is your level of concern pretty high here going into this final stretch of the season, the second half of, can you see them getting in as tonight? You know, Seattle just, it looks like they're beating Boston 3-0 here. That's a big win,
Jeez.
and that's tough. Tough to say that they're not they're not for real when those guys pretty much seem to be for real. But
Yeah.
thoughts on the Oilers and the battle that they have up against them here?
They created this situation. That's the
Yeah,
bottom line. Like
yeah,
they're their own worst enemy. I don't get that concerned, or I'm not at a level of extreme concern just yet. And there's others that will point to stats, trends, the advanced analytics and that kind of thing, and be like, hey, this is going in all the wrong directions. And yes, I fully agree with that, and I understand that, but you got to play the game. And these guys, and when I talk about it, and I've used this term so much in the last like month, I'm like, it's between their ears. It's between their ears. We've had people on the pre and post game show say, you got to get rid of the coach, got to get rid of the GM. This is all on Ken Holland. Yeah, he built this team, but everybody was saying, outside of the defense, like, this is a pretty decent roster.
yeah,
You're starting out with basically the team that went to the conference final. Granted, they were swept in 4, but that's a good starting point. And so this team and these guys, watching them, observing them, being there with them, up close and on the road with them, a lot of them for a lot of years, they have there's a swagger to them because they're good. These
yeah,
are exceptional hockey players. I am talking about McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Darnell Nurse. Like, they know they're good, and I think the secondary supporting cast of players, they can kind of fall into that watching them type of thing, and they end up not doing as much. And then if you get behind in games, Jay Woodcroft's rolling out the big dogs, and it's the same cycle that we saw with Dave Tippett. They're their own worst enemies. So I think when it's time to buckle up and get to it and do the dirty work, they will. Have they built up a lot of trust with everybody this year? No.
no.
But I think they will, because when urgency kicks in, even this year, they've shown us they can be a good team, and they beat some of the best teams.
Yeah, they definitely have, and they've it's that up and down. I think you were talking about the other day is the highest road or the biggest road swing they had for winning games is 5. So
Yep.
if they can kind of get back into that rhythm again, then they'll be okay. And I know Stoff put out that tweet that they're typically a better second half of the season team, and the stats do prove it. But you got teams coming on. The National Predators are coming on, and the Kraken are still holding on, and they're doing what they're doing. We'll get to them in a second, but with Vander Kane coming back, Tom, do you think this roster looks like once he gets back? Because they're obviously going to have to fit him under the cap and move some players around. But is there anything that you think? Players getting sent down to the minors, any trades, anything like that looking in the near future if he comes back next week?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we forget about the cap situation with
Yeah.
Vander Kane. I still think that it's kind of an easy way to go about it, but it would go a long way. Is you got to make this Jesse Puljujärvi move at some point here. The deal hasn't emanated, hasn't come to fruition. He, would welcome a fresh start. Like, I know some people would look at what we were saying in the media and say that's BS. That's BS. The guy said it to my face a couple of years ago while we were watching the NBA Finals when the Raptors were in it.
Yeah.
Fresh start, new city, just some. You get that mindset, you get that reset, and sounded like at the end of last season he was back to that point. And it's been a tough year for him. I'm sure it's grinding on him and it's wearing on him. So if you can finally pull the trigger on that deal, there's 3 million right there. Who would be sent down next? Maybe they look at sending Holloway down finally. I like Holloway. I hope they let him have more of an opportunity to develop at the NHL level. But if Evander Kane comes in and that takes away minutes or opportunity from Holloway, then maybe he's better served back in the minors.
Yeah.
And if you could find some combination that way, because I think, depth wise, I don't know if they want to get rid of Matthias Janmark, try to send him back down again. Maybe they look at moving on from Warren Fogle. He was a healthy scratch last week. So there's a couple of different things that they could do. But me personally, Josh, I think this Jesse Puljujarvi saga has to end, because as long as he's here, you're going to have these arguments and debates, and it's only going to get nastier and nastier. And he's had a bad year. Nobody can sugarcoat it. It's been bad.
Yeah. And it gets I'm in part of a couple Oiler chats, and it gets tense in those chats too. I don't try to chime in too much, but he's definitely a polarizing player. And, I know there's been you confirmed it and about him being on the block and whatnot. And I think at some point here, you got to make the move to free up that cap space. I hope you wouldn't have to totally sweeten it where you're sending out a second round or a third round pick, but you obviously got to get rid of them to get under that cap. But you would think obviously that team like the Arizona Coyotes, and I think what was really cool is Rashog and Gregor were talking about on their hit the other day is like Nick Bukestad, and Nick Bukestad was on with us a couple years ago on this podcast. And that guy, if the Oilers can get that guy, Tom, that would be a huge ad. He's a good locker room guy. He's more importantly, he's a good person. And we got him on because a good friend of yours, Lolly and Alex Petrovich. So Patch was able to get him on for us. But it's been an interesting thing with Puljujarvi, and I think at some point here the end's got to hit the road, and it has to happen there. But what's your make of Jack Campbell's season to date, and do you think he's kind of finding his groove with the new gear he's wearing now and feeling more comfortable maybe?
Yeah. I'll add one more thing about Bukestad too. You can never have enough good NHLers depth wise. That's a guy I brought up a couple of years ago. It didn't really take or anything like that. I don't even know if the Oilers were thinking about it, but I was like, why not go for a guy like Bukestad? He's a giant. He's in the league. He's a good hockey player. So we'll see what happens. And it's going to heat up in the next month or so for sure.
I think he was supposed to be a part of that deal with Patch getting here. I think there was, from what I understand, there's some talk. They couldn't make a bigger deal of it. But anyways, go on kind of, I guess Jack Campbell and the gear and all that. So
bad year. Yeah, he's got a winning record. He's been bad. It was really we watched him in preseason. We're like, okay, he's fine. Seems to be settling in all right. The team's doing good in the preseason. We know it's the preseason. There's always that caveat. But it was the Calgary game where he just got shelled, and it's I think it was the Kadri goal where it just trickled through his pads, and I was like, what was that? That was bad. And it just seemed to continue to snowball, and it just chipped away at his confidence. And he's a sensitive guy. He's a very nice guy, I have to say. And I've never seen two NHL goalies have such a friendship like him and Stuart Skinner, two of the nicest people you ever meet. And they literally go up and bro hug each other after practice, after a game, and have nice words of affirmation on a player-to-player teammate level. And I was like, I've never seen Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen do this. I never saw Cam Talbot do it with anybody. They like their backup goalies and the other guy. I never saw Devin Dubnyk do it with Victor Foss. No way. Definitely not Ben Scrivens. I was just like, what is happening? And they would bro hug right in front of me. And then Stuart would be like, okay, Tom, we're good. Let's continue this conversation. And I'm like, that was very nice. That is, I appreciate that very much. But this is a guy in Jack Campbell that's had a very winding, hard road to prominence in the NHL. And I think if, you get in your own head, it messes with you, and confidence is huge as a goalie. He's capable of much better. The guy that played for Toronto last year that went 31-9-6 is still somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I think this last like week and a half, 2 weeks, we're starting to see like slowly the pieces falling back into place. And if he gets into a bit of a groove, then they have themselves a half decent, respectable tandem. I think it's becoming pretty clear that Stuart Skinner's ready to kind of take over that role as number one. But this NHL now, it's a tandem league, and you need both guys firing on all cylinders. Let's see if he can keep going with it. I mean, yesterday against Anaheim, that was basically the San Diego Gulls with a couple of superstars in
Yeah.
the lineup on there. But yeah, it's been a bad year for him. He still has a winning record. His numbers and averages are garbage. And I know that they poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into helping him redefine his game. The pads, like you mentioned, something I didn't know
Yeah.
made a big difference. Like the firmness of the foam and how they're constructed. I had to ask Joaquin Gage about that, and a couple other goalies told me about it. That can mess with your head too. So it's been an interesting process. I saw Dustin Schwartz in the hallway during the Colorado game, and he's a friend, and I worked with him when he was with the Oil Kings, and of course when he got hired by the Oilers, and the Oilers were winning that game, and I had to leave to go set up for the post game show at the intermission, and I was like, "Hey, Schwartzy," and he's like, "I'm not in the mood to talk, Tom," and he just stormed by, and you know what? Good thing I didn't catch him post game because he probably would have clocked me.
Yeah, no, that would not have been good at all. So,
No,
no. What's your make in thoughts of what Jay Woodcroft has done this year? In some of our chats with some other fans here, some of the comments are being made that he's kind of watching a different game when he goes and talks to you guys after the games. Especially if they're getting outshot pretty bad, he
yeah,
has a really good excuse saying, "Well, they're just a high shot volume team," which is understandable. There are teams that are high shot volume teams that don't really give up much in the inner slots, but has he done enough to put this team in a position to succeed? We had Craig Button on a couple days ago on our podcast, and he said the comment he did not like, Tom, was when the penalty kill didn't do so good against LA. He didn't say we, he said they need to
yeah.
get going, and that comment kind of stuck out to Craig. But your thoughts with Jay Woodcroft and dealing with him on a day-to-day basis too. I think he's a nice guy. I don't know,
Yeah,
but you would know that more better.
yeah, he's an excellent human being. Well, I'll start with that. But what Craig brought up about that comment, saying they instead of we, I think that's an indicator of Jay getting frustrated and the patience wearing thin because he is a we guy.
Yes.
He's a positivity guy. When people and fans talk about just tell it to us straight, enough of this BS positivity, that's all deliberate. He is very aware, mindful, and he keeps track of the messaging. He's watching everything
Yeah.
all the time. So he's throwing up smoke screens to us in the media, and I know the fans want answers to these questions, and so do we. And he's kind of throwing us these BS answers, 100% deliberate. From everything I know in my time knowing Jay Woodcroft professionally over the last 8 years now, that's him doing it on purpose, and he's very hands-on, in depth as a coach. In terms of him being the guy to deliver this team, take it to the next level, I think he is capable of it. It's just a matter of those guys responding to the work being put in on the ice at practice, the messaging that him, Glenn Gulletson, Dave Manson, and Mark Stewart now are trying to get into their heads. And I think he's feeling the burn of coaching the Edmonton Oilers, more so because of the lack of results that are expected.
Yeah.
And then I also think he's realizing the same stuff that Dave Tippett, Ken Hitchcock to a certain extent, Todd McClellan all went through with these players, this core, is there's no simple solution to these guys. When they go and they're engaged, look out. But it's getting them to that point on a consistent basis that has dogged every single coach since Draisaitl, McDavid, Nurse, Nuge have been in this National Hockey League and with this team. And I think, for a bit there last season, they bought in. They bought in and they changed. We talked about the backtracking through the neutral zone, subtle little changes. But when you're engaged and you know what you need to do and you actually actively go about trying to make it happen, as opposed to just going through the motions, which I think this group gets caught doing, um, this team can be way better. And I mean, I think it's like 7 coaches in 10 years and 4 GMs.
Yeah.
And I bring that up when people text in or call in, and I'm like, what do you want? Like, you just got a new GM. He's taken this team to the playoffs 3 straight years now. They had success last year. The other 2 years they didn't. Obviously, the
Yeah.
sweep was bad. Losing to Chicago was bad.
Yeah.
But he's getting them there, and he's probably, I say, probably going to get them there again this year. To what extent, we shall see. It's the playoffs. It's crazy, but they've put in place all the pieces to have this be successful. Granted, the defense needs to get better. I think Jay's feeling the burn of coaching the Edmonton Oilers in this era, and he's feeling it now.
Yeah, yeah, you can definitely see it. It's I think the letting it breathe for too long finally got to him, where it's just
Yep.
I do get the positive vibes for his press conferences too, but I do think at some point here, like, the messaging has to be a little bit more stern. And it's not easy telling a player you got to sit, and if it's a $2 million player or a player that makes $750,000 in one
Yep.
full goal, like obviously over a $2 million player, that's not an easy conversation to have. So I think Derek Ryan was a healthy scratch last night, so that's still probably not an easy decision to have too. But
Yep.
the biggest thing you have control is the ice time for some of these guys. So before we move on, kind of talk about. I put this out the other day. I don't know how much there's stock and how much you weigh into the plus minus stat, but with McDavid and Draisaitl, and the point totals that they are, they're not really blowing the plus minus stat away. Tom, am I wrong on this, or does it need to be better, or it's just plus minus, and we don't need to really dive into that too much?
Plus minus. I know, like, some people just poo-poo it and they're like, "This is garbage."
Yeah.
It tells you something. Like, it's an indicator. Like, I know sometimes you get caught on a bad line change and you're a minus. That happens, or you just hop on the ice and your team scores. It happens. So there's a little bit of give and take there, but it gives you a sense of what's going on. And what it tells us about those two, which are two of the best players in the world, one being the best player in the world, is
Yeah.
they're not great defensively. And
Yeah.
it's okay to say that. Like,
Yeah.
they're not known for their defense. Are they okay at times defensively? Yeah. Are they on the PK? Yeah. One guy wins faceoffs more times than not. The other guy's super fast. Do they make mistakes 5-on-5, especially? Yeah. Like, Leon Draisaitl still button hooks at the blue line in the offensive zone, and like, will throw a backhander 45 feet across to the other team that takes it back the other. How many odd man Russians do they give up 5-on-5, or even when they have the power play? It's absurd, and it's part of that. So that I would just simply say, like, they're not that great defensively.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay to say that, and I'm not trying to be sacrilege or anything like that, but they have their blemishes in their own zone. And yes, their goalies haven't made all the saves when they needed to on 10 ball chances, which sometimes they help create. And their defense has had some issues as well. But people, and it's fair to point to the blue line, but this team defends as a 5-man unit so poorly. It's bad. Right?
Yeah.
And they're a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a center, right? So you got to take onus. Like, just before, and this is a bucket list for me, like, just before we had you on, I got to finally interview my hero and Doug Gilmour. So we had an interview with Doug Gilmour earlier today, and so that interview will drop next week. But I didn't know he started off as a defenseman, and then he moved into being, obviously the center that he was. But he said that time of being a defenseman really, got to see the game in a different way when he moved from D to forward. So it's kind of interesting to hear that, and honing that and really doing a good job. Kind of, it all starts on the right side of the pucks there, right? So it's and so we'll see what happens. But
Josh, one other thing too.
Yeah.
Just, it's a funny point, and I like that I remember hearing Doug Gilmour talk about that, and it's an amazing story. But, like, just to anybody who watches Oiler games, whenever there's a replay and they show that corner cam and the Oilers are getting scored on, look to see if McDavid or Draisaitl missed the check in front, and if their heads, like, look into the heavens, because that happens a lot.
Yeah, it's a telltale sign, I guess, is what you're. Yeah. So, all right. So a few more, like Seattle Kraken, they win. We'll do 2 more here. But Seattle Kraken 3-0 win against the Boston Bruins tonight. The Bruins are probably the best team in the league. They haven't lost too many games, especially at home. But a statement win from the Kraken. And are they for real, Tom, or what are we seeing here with them?
Yeah, I think if they lost that game to Edmonton, 2 weeks ago to start this road trip, which could have been a road trip from hell, maybe a different story. But man, when you have confidence and you've got guys that you believe in, people cast you out like they did with Vegas in their first year, like it galvanizes you. And once you get some results, like confidence, right? Like
Yeah,
you feel it, and you don't think anybody can stop you and slow you down. And I think that's what's happening with the Seattle Kraken. So no cakewalk next Tuesday when they come to town against the Oilers. I remember in the preseason, right before the regular season, the Kraken were here and just going down their list of the roster, and I was like, they don't really have any bad players. Like that guy's solid. That guy's solid. Ah, he's pretty good. He's good for Everly. He'll get 20 to
yeah,
25 goals, 50 to 60 points, automatic.
yes.
And like Wenberg is a guy with a lot of potential. I thought picking up Bjorkstrand was a good move, and a
Daniel
healthy
Strong.
Tana,
Yeah,
Daniel Sprong. Like you look at their roster and you're like, okay, nobody's like a superstar. Matty Beniers could become one. I
yeah,
love watching him play, but you're like, but there's no real like holes or deficiencies. And maybe on the back end, you could look at the third pair and go, I don't know who William Borgen is. Well, guess what? When they were here a week and a half ago, I was like, damn, William Borgen's on the ice a lot, and he's a mean SOB. Like, I thought he was good.
yeah,
I was noticing him. I'm like, why did I even question who the hell he was? Because I think he's excellent.
yeah,
So I guess the hole for them would be goaltending, but somehow Martin Jones is just on fire for them, and now
yeah,
Grubauer's back. And that kind of shows you that good structure and responsible play in front of your goalies can kind of mask some deficiencies there. So if you have, good elements of your team game, it can kind of gloss over some bad elements. If you're the Oilers, maybe, the back end could be glossed over and masked with its inefficiencies by good goaltending and solid defensive play from a 5-man unit. Guess what? That hasn't really happened. But the Kraken, good for them. I think they're going to be a playoff team this year.
yeah. They'll be good. They'll be good to watch. And honestly, them generating a lot of money for the league too is good. Elliot Friedman was saying they're one of the high generated teams for revenue, so that'll be good to.
Are
Yes, it's all about that, right?
yeah.
We'll finish up on this. I've never personally met you. I've just followed you a lot, and I met your brother Paul, but so a good family. You come from a good family. I never met your other brother, but one of the cool things I liked about kind of following you is the fact of you giving back to the game and getting out and helping out Lolly Tour with Apna Hockey and getting on the ice with the kids there. And how important is that to you? How much does that mean to you and your relationship with Lolly and what Lolly's done with Apna Hockey today?
Yeah, I've known Lolly for a long time, since he was just a kid,
Yeah,
and what a great story he's continuing to write. So yeah, amazing what he and Dampy have done with Apna and the Willie O'Ree Award a couple of seasons ago. Well deserved and absolutely fantastic. And to help out a couple of years with Apna has been great. It kind of reminds you that it takes away the business element of the game and all the nastiness, and you're like, oh yeah, it's just the game, and these kids love it for the right reasons, and it kind of brings you back. And if it helps some kids, or if that's their introduction to the game and they fall in love with it, fantastic. If it helps them understand it or become a little bit better, awesome. But it is kind of neat to see all levels, all people from all walks of life, different backgrounds, taking into the game of hockey, because our world, our country is evolving, our sport is evolving, and you know what, like it's fun and cool, and
yeah,
to be able to just, and to Josh, like I'm a puck pusher, like I'm a great puck pusher. I let the real coaches
yeah,
with all the certificates do what they need to do, but I'll push pucks, I'll play along. But it is a lot of fun to do, and I'm glad I get the chance to do stuff like that. I get to do it with the Gretzky Hockey School as well,
yeah.
and it is a good reminder for someone like me, where you're stuck day in day out dealing with the millionaire athletes that maybe want to hate you, or the listeners or viewers that want to hate you. But when it comes to the kids, it's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's definitely awesome. sorry, my camera's been messed it up on my computer. So now I'm glitching like crazy, but it's right at the end anyway. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the 2 Months podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on, and we look to have you on going forward here. And we're going to be at the John Reed Memorial, so I don't know if you ever if you're bored or anything, you want to come by and hang out. We're going to be there after Jason Greg. I think Gregor's there on Thursday, I think, and
Yep.
kind of helping out the rest of the following days. But so yeah, all the best to you and to your family in 2023, and great job getting the little pup for your parents there. That was pretty cool to see on Instagram. So Penny was the name, I believe, right? Is that
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, that's her name. She's a rescue pup, and we dropped it on our parents. And my mom obviously fell in love with her right away, and my dad did too, but he tried to pretend he didn't.
Yes.
And he's the one that actually named her. And guess what, Josh? I went over to their place for dinner on Sunday,
Yeah.
and she was following him around like that was his best friend, and she was also vice versa. He was her best friend. It's amazing
Yeah.
the kinship there. So I think it was a good gift. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. It was a good thing. There's sometimes you see a lot of good things on social media, so
Yeah.
take care of that, right? So thanks for sharing that for everyone that did get to see it, and again, all the best to you in the new year, and look forward to catching up with you again here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Josh.
No worries.